Hi there, Vanguard fans. This is extremewirehead for another Vanguard Cardfight Vanguard clan intro. This is a series that I developed to teach people new to the game. My biggest problem with Cardfight Vanguard is probably its diversity. You have a whole lot of different clans that do a whole lot of different things, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming for someone who wants to get in. So the easiest way to go about it is just to cut them up to clans and talk about them in their own light, just to give you a good idea of what you're getting yourself into, especially if you want to pick one out, because of course, money is money. And in this case, in this video, I want to take a look at Dimensional Police. And this won't be a very long one, because I think in terms of complications, Dimensional Police is actually a very, very simple clan. It is a clan of giant robots. If you have ever seen the old Power Ranger shows, Gundams, stuff like that, Dimensional Police channels that into a single being. It is a clan devised almost entirely of gigantic robots and their capabilities and how they function in a land of combat. They are a race of robots that fight and transform and combine into greater robots to push their skills towards you and try to get the better hand. This is how they operate, this is how they think, and this is how I want to present them. Everything in Dimensional Police focuses around the Vanguard, especially far more than you might expect normally. Unlike some of the other clans, they don't kill their friends so much as they put them all together into the Vanguard, punch through and make amazing plays with they punch through and have probably the most threats in the game. So, let's get down to it. There isn't much else to say about them other than they're going to punch through right about everything because that's what a superhero would do. So, the first card I want to look at is a G4 called Super Cosmic Hero X-Rogue. X-Rogue's skill is when this unit's attack hits a Vanguard, if that unit is of power 37,000 or total, including any power-ups, draw a card. Your opponent chooses one of his or her rear guards and retires it. Because of the setup that is involved, I think this is a very good introduction to how the Cosmic Hero line and even the Dimensional Police in general will work. They will be finding ways to empower themselves, mostly on the Vanguard, sometimes on the rear guards. And effects happen when they empower themselves. They use this to make themselves stronger, obviously, because of the power boost, but the combination of power itself as the activator means that more stuff happens just because they added power. This means that you have a cascading effect of stuff that's going to happen in a lot of cases, and a lot of these different cards actually activate upon each other to make devastating plays. In this case, it's very simple. Reach the power threshold when you start at 26,000 and draw a card once you attack. Very simple, very, very useful, and I'm not exactly sure if anybody uses this anymore because of all the great choices that they've got now. But I think it's still a good place to start, especially when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with the clan. And I really like these cards because cards like these really do teach you. First, you have to understand this is how the clan operates before you move on to greater things. That's all I've got to say about Extra. Very simple card. And I don't want to deal too much into the G-Force, but we're going to look into one more because I think it's another step, another direction that you can take when dealing with the Dimensional Police. Just like how the Dimensional Police show the brighter side of combat, the superheroes, the great faces of robots and mechas and whatever you want to call them. They also show you the bad guys, the kaijus, the monsters, the Godzillas, if you will. In this case, you have Dark Superhuman Omega, which is the other side of the coin for the given cost that you will be seeing. If you pay it, choose one of your rear guards, put it in your soul, so he eats his own unit. Choose all of the units in the opponent's front row, reduce their power by the original power of the card placed into soul. The robots are the heavy-handed lance. They are the unbreakable lance. They tear through things with very little self-regard, and in doing so, create this awesome figure of an unbreakable force that can beat away the darkness. In the other side of the spectrum, the same clan with the same cards can also be played in a much different light, as the bad guys, as the dark side of whatever world that they were trying to hope to clear up. And their side of things is things activate when they destroy the power of their opponents, when they remove them from their strength, when they lose power. And that is their greatest strength. Having the ability to remove power from the opponent means that your side is proportionally stronger by almost the same idea, except very, very minor difference, but it might be important because we are talking about losing the power of everything, which is technically the same as your entire front row earning power. Slightly cheaper in some cases, maybe more expensive, but that's up to you to decide. I still think that Dark Superhuman Omega is a decent card, and maybe one that you can fit in case you're not exactly sure what to do. The only G3 I'm going to look at is probably the G3 that really put Dimension Police on the map. It is the one card that I think more or less changed the way that we view Dimension Police today. Dimension Police is a very old clan. It's got a lot of pieces, a lot of parts that do a lot of different things, but they were never really in the center focus of the Vanguard community. Recently, they've placed a lot more emphasis upon themselves because of new tricks, but back in the day, the one card that I think really put them on the map is, of course, Super Dimensional Robo Kaiser. Kaiser was the card. It is the breaker. It is the card that punches straight through any defenses and makes your own plays through them. And it is from this that you can create. Super Dimensional Robo Kaiser is a break ride. So his ability comes out when he rides on top of when you ride on top of him to create the new fight, the new Vanguard. And the skill that the card that rode over him gets is costed at Counterblast 1, 10,000 in the crit, which is natural, and the skill when this unit drive checks a grade 3, in other words, when he fails an attack, more or less, choose one of your opponent's guardians, retire it, and the unit's effects of cannot be hit is nullified. It is a card that actually forces your opponent to think very carefully about how they want to guard. New cards have come up ever since then to increase the ideas of this deck. But the idea of Kaiser is it redefined Dimension Police. Not only do they now just push for higher power and things activate, but now just by the mere fact of activating their skills, they are much harder to block. In some cases, they can even destroy the cards that are blocking. Being able to punch through defenses and stop even the mightiest of perfect guards. In some cases, it might even be worth your while to put 2 perfect guards if need be, but the inconsistency of it is probably its greatest weakness. Even so, the fear that it instills upon its opponents, the fanciful lies it tells that maybe, just maybe, there's another G3 on the top, and how it could break through whatever you've got. And if you have to take it, you may be taking 2 to 3 hits at once, is the essence of Dimension Police. They don't wait for you to hit the low numbers before they try to kill you. You're probably dead before that even happens. And that is the target that they are aiming for and how quickly they have to push. So, because of how quickly they have to push, they were given this skill, and it is probably one of the most defining things about them. That's all I have to say about Kaiser. Very simple card, one that I think you should take a look at, especially when you're trying to understand how they operate now, even with the newer cards. I want to look at some of the maybe fancier cards, older cards of the clan, and the first I want to look at is the Grade 2 Platinum Ace. Platinum Ace is not a worthwhile card to put in your deck, I think. But I think it kind of shows you how they used to think. Even back then, when we were talking about the Grade 2s and the Grade 1s and all these old cards, their ideas and how they operated were very simple. I gain power, I get powers, I get crits. They get crits quite often. They push for higher numbers. They even eat up their rear guards and combine them into some other form, as you'll see later, but it's always focused around the Vanguard. This skill only works in the Vanguard. If he reaches the threshold of 13,000, gets a crit. And that is very important because early on, that's pretty expensive or difficult to reach. Platinum Ace really does showcase that sometimes you're going to have to play aggressively, and it is maybe not the greatest card to put in, but I think it's a very interesting one just because of how fast the game has gotten. Maybe even worthwhile in some small instances, but I think it just shows to you again that Dimension Police is about the center. The center is its strongest point, and probably where it's going to focus all of its efforts. The next card I think is probably one of those cards that put them into their place, put them into an idea of exactly how they wanted to move forward and how to activate all these different effects. One of the cards that I didn't show here really does show it, but I didn't want to combine too many things from future installments and how they evolved the clan. But the Cosmic Hero line in Dimension Police actually had a lot of cards that gained effects when they had powers. And you couldn't get this very easily unless you got triggers. This card, Cosmic Hero Grand Chopper, changed things. Cosmic Hero Grand Chopper's skill is when his power is increased to 11,000 or greater, pay the cost of Counterblast 1, choose 2 of your other units, and they get 4,000 until end of turn. It is not a card that you have to use very often because it is rather expensive to use, but it is important to have because it activates many different skills. When you have rear guard, G2s especially, that need a little bit of power boost to activate their skills, you can play around with the different combinations. Sometimes they can even activate other cards. It doesn't say that you can't activate another Grand Chopper with a Grand Chopper. The combinational plays and how to order these things is something you're going to have to watch out for because all of these effects usually funnel back into having a much stronger Vanguard. This card was key to how the old Cosmic Heroes decks worked, and I think it's still an important card to take a look at just because of how crazy these plays can be. Of note, though, is how expensive Counterblast 1 is for this effect, because you're only getting about plus 8,000 power, which in these days is not much. And finally, the last G1 I want to look at is a big one. He is probably the king of many defeats, many victories because of how crazy his effect is. And I really like him for it because he is probably the single defining characteristic of Dimension Police. Even more than all the Yuushas and all the Kaisers, this card really did change things. Commander Laurel. Commander Laurel sits on a very small power of 4,000 for a G1, but he does with one of the strongest game skills for a rear guard. When your Dimension Police Vanguard attacks and it hits, you may pay the cost, which is rest 4 of your other rear guards, choose your Vanguard and stand it. By this effect alone, you can actually see the number of different plays that can play out. It works even when you're striding, even when you're having other effects. Sometimes when you've got Kaiser on. By having him around, you force your opponent to think that by letting a hit through, they have the opportunity to have a second hit. Or maybe even a third if they're somehow magically inclined. But it is the card that really did change the game for Dimension Police, making them capable of probably far more offensive power than they were first given credit for. They rest their entire rear guard lanes for the chance to have the Vanguard attack once more. By allowing the Vanguard attack once more, they actually gain 2 cards from the drive check. Not only that, they also get the drive check's effects, which puts them far further ahead than one might expect at first. Because of all of these things, I can't hesitate to put this on the list because Laurel was that one card. Even to this day is rather expensive, has many uses, has evolved into so many different ways of using that I think it deserves your attention. The reason why we can make such a big deal about pushing more power on just the Vanguard and not the rear guard. The reason why they can push through so many different guards, so many crazy plays just by being them is solely because of this card and how it operates. And the last card I want to look at, this is not a very long list. I am very pleased with myself on how much I've had to call for this list, is Dimensional Robo Go Yuusha. The last card I want to show you just re-emphasizes how the Dimensional Robos, maybe even the Dimensional Police as a whole, think. Everything is for the power of the Vanguard. This card's skill is basically combine 4 rear guards into the Vanguard, and the Vanguard becomes any G3 with Dimensional Robo you would like. There are new cards that do this for stride and all of that. But what's important to note is they have starters that push the envelope, that change things, that make you possible to create what you want and have the G3 that you always wanted. By having a card like this, you can push much faster than your opponent. By having the combinational effects of these magical robots, you can actually push a little bit faster. Maybe too fast. That's what I wanted to note with Dimensional Police. Everything is for the Vanguard, everything is costed reasonably, I think, or maybe even lightly. But the problem with Dimensional Robo is, and Dimensional Police in general, is how quickly they burn out. They have all these strange effects, they have all these powerful moves, but they are costed properly. And everything funnels back to the Vanguard. At the end of it, all you'll be left with is a Vanguard sitting on the need for more power, and being unable to fulfill that in some case because you lack the Counterblast. Counterblast is probably the most expensive resource within Dimensional Police currently, and managing that resource, making sure that you can use it effectively, is going to save your behind in whatever purpose that you're looking into, because Dimensional Police will worry about all of these things when they're running it through their head. The most important part of Dimensional Police, I think, is probably the first 5 turns. In the first 5 turns, if you can hold out, they've spent all their resources and are unable to continue, you are probably in a very good position. Being able to kill you by that point means that you will not be able to have enough cards to play many of your resources. They won't even let you have some of the damage because they can probably punch through and kill you very quickly. In respect to that, when you're playing against a Dimensional Police player, you should think about overguarding, because they are actually putting themselves all in. A lot of their plays will involve using more Counterblast, using more cards, then you might feel uncomfortable giving up your own because I've already put down this card. But you have to understand that sometimes they can break through defenses, sometimes they can make fantastic plays, and these fantastic plays will not last long. It will burn them out, and before they burn out, you have to hope that you can survive and outlast them. In that sense, I think that Dimensional Police is a very strong clan, has a very small window of attack, but can push through to make some very exciting plays, and is a very, very strong clan. And that's it for me. This has been Extreme Wirehead. I hope you enjoyed. Dimension Police is a very interesting clan because of a number of different reasons, but it just showcased the power of a Vanguard and the importance of relying on the strength of your Vanguard. If you want to give it a shot, I think it's a relatively cheap clan to get into at first, but many of the pieces, especially the fancier strides, are rather expensive, so watch your wallet, really. Anyway, I'll see you on the next clan intro. Peace.